Hey there, welcome. My name is Jim Tincher. I'm the CEO and founder at Heart of the Customer. And we're here today with a couple of my favorite CX folks to talk about how do you structure a CX team for success. I'll be sprinkling a little bit of research to go into this, but really the highlights of the show are Lori and Roxy. And so I'm going to start out by asking them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Lori. Tell us a little bit about you and your background, and we'll move on to Roxy.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for having me. Always exciting, and I love being on a panel with Roxy. I've always learned so much when I've heard you speak, so I'm looking forward to learning more from you now as we have this conversation. And Jim, we've known each other for years, so always a pleasure. I am Vice President of Client Experience and Digital Strategy at Compeer Financial. Compeer Financial, we are proud to be part of the National Farm Credit System. The majority of our business is providing lending to farmers. So we're not a bank. We don't do deposits or checking or anything like that. But if you want to buy 500 acres of ground in Illinois, we can help you with that, right? Or if you need a $200,000, $250,000 combine, we can help you with that. So my background, I started in Voice of the Customer before we knew to call it Voice of the Customer, when we were still calling it customer satisfaction. I have always loved that I've done all phases, all different types of research. I learned very quickly I don't care at all about product research. Some people love it and it's wonderful, but I don't care what the next flavor or color of anything is. So I'm not terribly good at it, but I care very deeply about helping companies do better for their customers and having their customers help them win in their markets. I got tired of doing great research and having it sit in a box somewhere. So really, when CX became a thing, moved into the CX side of the world, so we could really start taking action on that. So that's what I do.
All right, and Roxy.
Hi, everyone. Roxy Sturminger. I'm Vice President of CX Strategy at UKG. Essentially, UKG, we are a human capital management SaaS provider where our purpose is people. I've been in this game for almost 20 years, long stint at Forrester Research, which is a fabulous ground of just research and really understanding what customer experience is, how do we define it, how do we measure it, and how do we enhance it and evolve it. I had the immense pleasure alongside Megan Burns, when she was also there, to co-architect the CX Index. And then got this great opportunity over 5 years ago to just do this awesomeness for one company. At the time, it was Ultimate Software, and then after the merger with Kronos, we're now UKG. And so my entire team is about customer experience strategy, customer experience enablement into the piece, with a real deep penchant in the role of emotion and how emotion really influences customer behavior, customer perception, and in turn, a company's financials in terms of revenue, cost to serve, all of those elements there. So this is I've had an immense pleasure always having these conversations with Jim and then Lori as well, and really looking forward to especially this concept of building CX teams. Especially, I've been very lucky to, over the past 5 years, have had this small CX strategy team, and about from 7 people to about 15, and now it's grown to over 50 people into the mix, sort of talking through what that looks like. So this is gonna be a fun topic.
All right. And so both Lori and Roxy will be talking at the Do B2B Better conference coming up on September 12th here in Minneapolis. Roxy will be talking about emotions, about how to measure, how to activate emotions, specifically to B2B. And, spoiler alert, yes, B2B customers do have emotions. Lori will be talking about this topic specifically on a panel on how do you hire a CX team, which is an area we've seen a lot of interest in, is how do you put together the right skill sets to enable your CX program really to drive change. And so we have some great background from each of them here talking about this. Now, for anybody doing the math, they both started their work when they were 5. So that's how that math works.
So kind.
Well, let's start out. Roxy, let's start with you just because you mentioned it. You mentioned that you have a very large team. Let's talk about more how many there are and what those common roles are. And then Lori, let's hear about you afterwards as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So when I started at the time, it was just me. There was really no CX function into the mix, and I was given the mandate to, what do we do? How do we do this? How do we create a program around all of this? And obviously, at the start of it, was very focused on the classic elements of a CX team. What's the measurement architecture? How do we weave it in across the ecosystem? How do we get buy-in for everybody to lean into the approach that we were recommending? A very emotion-specific approach, which was very net new for the company to really embrace an emotional North Star, and not just let's have our customers feel good, but very focused what turned into being the role of confidence, and also mitigating disappointment, frustration, those other sort of counter pieces. So it started to percolate. Sort of year one was about 2 or 3 people besides myself. Then it started to get into about 7 to 10 people, but all of them were hired in the context of being CX strategists that had deep knowledge across every single competency that we have, like as the CXPA, and how we define a CX professional. So I was very fortunate to create a team of unicorns into that mix. With that, and with the movement that we were getting, and the traction we were getting, and how we approach CX, that started to get a lot of buy-in and support. And then in the last about 6 to 7 months, we've now absorbed customer enablement function, operational customer comms, internal comms. We've also the knowledge. How do we drive self-sufficiency with our customers? Different tools like Pendo. So it's really blown into not only how some may perceive, okay, we are figuring out the news and we're reporting the news and why the news matters to you, in terms of taking all of that and now saying, how are we going to change next steps ourselves, and then make each team successful, and especially customers, and protect that revenue, expand it, and do it as efficiently as possible. So it's become a bigger remit, which has been really, really, really fun.
All right.
And can I ask a question around that, Roxy?
Yeah.
Do you have, are your team, are they generalists, so they work with like one business area, or do you have people specialized in the different practice areas?
So I have, I rotate people. So
You wrote?
in terms of the different business units, because customer journey is interconnected, there's downstream impacts, and then those downstream impacts, sort of circular, right? It's a loop. And what I didn't want is anybody to just know. So for us, since we're B2B SaaS, the implementation phase of the journey, and then not have deep line of sight of what does that transition into support success look like, and those 2 pieces. So this individuals, especially in sort of that strategy and execution piece, they're have deep knowledge in all CX skill sets: journey mapping, data analytics, research, change management, all ProSci certified, all of that. They start in one business unit, and then I rotate them, sort of like cycle like college, and then they'll go into the next one, and then I shift, so that over time, they're knowledgeable of every single business unit. They have shown their value to every single leader, and they understand, if they're in one business unit, what that means for the others, because inherently all business units within a company can function in a silo. How does that look?
Yeah.
So that's that group.
What great connectivity. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So Lori, tell us about your team.
Well, I will caveat this by saying we're in the middle of a reorg. So what I say today may be completely different by the time this webinar airs. Or in a week, or in 2 weeks, or whatever it is. So what we've got right now is we have a very small CX team, and we have digital strategy on our team as well. So I really think about it. Our organization is very much a relationship-driven organization where we use digital to support the relationship. So I have one CX person focused on our traditional analog experience, everything from our financial officers going out to the farm to meet with clients, to clients coming in the door. And I have another one very focused on the digital experience, right? Our digital strategist is focused in that area. I tell them they are a 2-lane highway and there's a dotted lane between them. So you can stay in your own lane, but you're gonna cross over a little bit. Oddly, our website reports to me, so that is part of it. I think that is one of the things that's going to change with this reorg, but that's fine. Primary communication tool for our clients for sure. And then I also have one researcher dedicated to usability testing. As we are doing our product releases around the user experience. So we have UX designers. We didn't have anybody who could do usability testing in a production mode, so we added that. Fantastic resource. And then I work across the businesses in advising and structuring and figuring out where we go next.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper on that, on UX, user experience, user design, because when we've been doing some research here, we've been talking to different CX leaders, and a fair amount of them have UX reporting into them. So it sounds like you do, Lori. Roxy, do you have that, or is that distinct? There's software companies, so that's probably different.
Yeah, so it's distinct. So it'll sit on the product side of the house. So I'm on the services side, but we have a dotted line. So the leader on usability and UX design. So we're just in lockstep with each other there.
Excellent. And where in the organization do you all sit? Who do you report to?
So I report up into global services operations that then reports up into the chief customer officer and strategy on that side.
Okay. And I report through our CMO, up through our CMO now.
Okay. And that's what we've seen is a fair number are reporting up through marketing. It's not the majority, but it probably is the plurality. Not very many are reporting to the global services organization simply because many companies don't have a global services organization. So a little distinct there. Now, when we look
I think
at
a lot of it depends on which executive is the one that's really passionate about it. And one of the things I love about CX is because it pulls from so many different disciplines, right? So if it's your operations people who are super passionate about it and they're willing to fund it, that's where it grows up out of, right? So that's where it lives. If it's coming out of research or voice of the customer, it often ends up in marketing, right? And in new organizations, it often ends up in marketing. If it's coming out of call center, right? If you want somebody managing the call center, again, that often lives in operations. So I think a lot of it depends on where that passion for it lies.
Well, one thing that was interesting in the writing of the book, Do B2B Better, is that 2 of the case studies had to switch reporting as they went. One went from the chief customer officer to chief operating officer. Talked about how that was such an enabler, allowed Bill to really do more work, to really get in the guts of things. While Olga went from the chief operating officer to the chief commercial officer, which is somewhat similar to chief customer officer, and said how it really enabled her to have more influence and get better work done. And so it was interesting that one was moving to the COO, the other moved away from the COO, and both said it was a fantastic change. So I think you're right. It depends on where the passion is. It's less important where you report, that matters, but more about what you can do with it.
It is. And it's also, I would say, it is where you can sort of have those, who wants to lean into those conversations, right? So you have the stereotypical, the CMO sector, the global support sector, and so forth. What starts to get interesting is, can you start to have those conversations with the CFO? Can you start to have conversations with the CTO or the CIO and all of those elements? And so that's where I think it's critical who you report it into and how willing are they to open up, broker the conversations, those first conversations where then you show your show and then you sell them on like what this is. But I think that's the key piece. It doesn't specifically matter where you're at as long as your leader enables you and supports you in what you need to do. But especially it's the brokering to the other tethers in the organization that you need to have. Like I needed to have access to financials so I can link it all automatically and integrate it the second I get feedback. That's a conversation that got brokered very easily. And then, we walk through it. So I think that's the critical piece.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. CX, as we all say, is a team sport, and you got to get everybody involved across the organization to really put the customer at the center.
Yep.
Something I'll always ask is, how do you make CX a CFO conversation? How do you do that? And that doesn't happen. That can happen from marketing. That can happen from operations. It can happen from anywhere in the organization. If, as you suggested, your leader is comfortable having that conversation and brokering it to happen. And that's why it may be less important. It's always nice to be in the power center, but a little less important where you report, and more does that leader that you're working with, are they willing to broker those conversations and bring it right to the heart of the strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our CFO is very focused on, well, we have a new CFO, but our previous CFO, and I suspect this one will be, very focused on growth. And coming from ag, I always say you got two ways to grow your business. You got more yield or more field. So you can go get more stuff or you can get more out of what you got, right? So how does CX impact those two things? More field, going to get more, expanding our markets. How do we play? What do clients, our customers really appreciate about us? How does that translate to other customer groups? Things like that. More yield, right? How do we reduce our cost to serve? How do we get more business? How do we get greater share of wallet? All of those kinds of things. So when you talk to your CFO, you talk in money. When you talk to your operations people, you talk efficiency. When you talk to marketing, you talk leads, right? So you've got to talk the language of whatever executive leader you're working with.
Exactly. So and the CX of the financial piece, it's an interesting one, right? So it's like, okay, so which factors can you impact financially? And then it all depends on, so which sector are you in? Are customers trapped? Are they not trapped? There's all of those nuances. And I've always found that the entryway that gets their for me, gets the attention is cost to serve, because it's the easiest to link to CX. Because retention is of revenue, that's a longer tail play. That's something that's going to take time to see if there's fruition. And did you protect the revenue? Did you expand it given the sales cycle? And again, this is all conditional on which industry sector you're in. But for us, it was a much easier play to sit there and go, okay, so let me show you the link between CX and cost to serve, with our recommendations on how we are more efficient in executing the experience, or by even doing things that does not sound like it's efficient, but it's actually a win-win from the customer perspective. So sort of something like service hallmarks. And there was one that we had of stay on the call and see what other cases can be addressed at the same time. And that was sort of oh, wait, that's going to open up the hold time and the call time and all of those types of things. And then what we show is hold, see what the impact is. It actually didn't increase call time. It actually increased OSAT. And oh, by the way, your support individuals were more efficient. And that conversation, then the CFO, anybody just leans in and go, okay, so that's interesting. So then you do all of that. That's how we approached it, was then you do that, and then the percolating with the revenue piece, protecting or expanding, will manifest down the line, because that's a longer tail play to show the relationship between CX and revenue. At least for our, in a B2B SaaS type of world.
I would agree with that.
Well, and that's what's a little bit interesting. I want to get back to structure in a minute, but in your case, Roxy, if you flip the switch and went from a horrible experience to a wonderful one, on the revenue side, it would take years before you saw the difference, because your sales cycle, in your case, Lori, since loans are typically more annual, not exactly, but often that case, it would probably be a little bit faster for you on the revenue side.
Well, operating loans are annual, but if you're going to buy a 500 acres of land, it's going to take you a while to pay that back. Generally, it's not going to be a yearly thing. What I would say, I think about it this way too, is that a lot of the CX work we do is at the micro level, but the results we're looking for are at the macro level, right? So it's a lot easier to tie some of those micro operational cost to serve things directly to the CX impact, as opposed to this long-term, we've managed to grow our customer lifetime value by this amount, right? So it's a lot harder to say by changing the way this letter is worded is not going to improve my NPS, right? It's just not.
Yeah.
But if we improve the way all our communications are worded, right? If we can, those cumulative efforts, those are the things that are going to start driving those macro numbers.
Yep. Exactly. Well, let's move it a little bit more in structure. I know you talked a little bit about it there, but I put together a few different common areas in which we focus. And you can come up with your own list at home, but we look at, for example, voice of the customer in surveys, analytics, change management, experience design. As I've talked to, for the book, 200 Hours of Interviews, we found it's all over the place in terms of, voice of the customer in surveys commonly in-house in part of CX, but not always. Analytics, more commonly outside, but not always. Change management, what is that? Some groups. Experience design could be inside or outside. Let's talk about those four: the VOC and surveys, analytics, change management, and experience design. Are those within your CX team or externally?
Those are for us, they're external. It sounds like for you, they're internal.
Yeah, I purposely,
So very different.
yeah, so I purposely did it that way. And Jim knows this in a lot of conversations that we've had over the years. I have felt that faster realization of what we want to do can only manifest if like we have the knowledge or the skill set to do it. So we're not reliant on the time delay that it takes to talk to the other team that does it, then drive those activities, then wait to see if they have it on their bandwidth. Can they fit you in? That type of stuff. So that was a very big thing when I was building my team. That's why I wanted the unicorns. I wanted the ones that could be able to do all of that. Doesn't mean that they do that 100% of the time, every single day and so forth, but are able to pivot where they need to without the reliance of waiting for somebody else to contribute to it. And it's allowed us to be much more agile and very quick to engage and respond and figure out next steps as a result, which I know is very outliery to that front.
Fantastic.
It's been how I personally approach this.
Yeah, and I agree. I would have approached it the same way when I joined this organization 3 years ago. It was to set up the CX as a function, and I thought, okay, I'm going to need to set up voice of the customer, and I'm going to need to set up change management, and on and on and on. And I came in, and this organization already had a great change management team. They have a great business process team. They have a great analytics team, right? The VOC was very good. I went in, I went to spend a lot of time with the leader of it. I'm like, yeah, okay, you got this, right? You're good. Good closed loop system. I'm like, I don't need to fix that. So this enables me to be a little more nimble, right? And not have to manage 50 people. I get 5. that helps. But they get to be experts in their discipline. And the other things that come into those organizations that don't come through me, we then have a chance to see things that haven't necessarily come to CX. Business process will come to us, change management will come to us and say, well, hey, we really need to talk about what's the customer journey. So I think the more people you can get in the organization saying customer experience, sort of the broader the impact can be as well. So
how are you able to navigate that? So since you had and that's fabulous, right? You came in and there was a lot of stood up. And then for my case, there wasn't. So I had to do all the standing up. So I had that luxury to sort of keep it all within and then bespoke it out.
Right.
How do you handle sort of the requesting process, right? Okay, I need some process people, I need some change management people, and their sort of competing remit for the other parts of the organization. What has been your secret sauce in terms of being able to have the ability to stay agile and quick, but sort of request out the work?
To get onto their calendars?
Yeah.
Very good question. We are fortunate. We are a very customer-driven organization, right? So when you say customer, or in our case, client, right, that really trumps operational efficiency in our place. So we're very fortunate in that regard. We have strong teams in those areas, and the leaders are very engaged. Now, I started there in July of 2020. So it was all virtual in a very relationship-driven company. So I spent a lot of very intentional time building relationships, going to their team meetings, sitting with them, learning about what their business is, starting to drip in. What is CX? How does it fit? What is the role of data analytics, right, in that, right? And how can we help you? And then we would, every year with our advanced analytics team, we give them a couple of really fun things to chew on that they really enjoy working on. So those kinds of things help too.
Nice.
So one of the things, Lori's part of our fellowship, a small number of customer experience leaders that get together and share what's happening in their experiences. And we were
Which
talking with our
is,
friend.
by the way, which is awesome. So I just
Oh, thank you.
fantastic. Yeah.
We were talking about that at the conference too, at the Do B2B Better conference. But one of our fellow members is Marlange with Walgreens. And we had a really interesting conversation regarding the benefits and drawbacks of having VOC on your team. One of the challenges in CX could be, and I've written about this a lot, you get labeled as the survey person.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the survey results? I don't want to know anything else. I just want to know the survey results, which is a little bit easier not to be that person if surveys aren't on your remit, aren't in your area. But on the other hand, if you're learning new things and want to change measurement, that's really hard if surveys don't roll up to you. And so you have the opposite approaches. That give thoughts to specifically VOC, internal, external. What have you found?
So for me, it was very evolutionary. So because we had to completely build from the ground up in architecture, right? A measurement architecture into that piece. So yes, for like the first year or two, and that was partly just because of the environment that I came into, it was very surveyed. It was the, what's the CX story, that 3-part CX story that we had, and sort of this whole concept of like, let's get you to understand why we ask it the way we ask it and what we're getting and sort of how to think about things. And that's why from the outset, we had all of our data automatically integrated with descriptive and outcome metrics and all of that to sort of put that. So that was about a year or two campaign. Then what ends up happening is we've now gotten to the point where we just don't talk about the survey. We don't talk about the metrics. And instead we talk about, okay, we were able to shift subscription margin or services margin by a certain percentage point, or by the way, the call time stayed the same and is in best practice parameters, but then we changed the experience, we changed these experience elements, right? Service hallmarks or things along those lines. We actually don't talk too much about those. It's monitored, quarterly business reviews, all of that type of stuff, but it isn't the daily function. The daily function is in the experience derived, and are we doing it in as efficient a way as possible? So the conversations have pivoted, but that only could happen after we did the whole getting everybody used to how we measure experience, why we measure it that way. So it's this, like, we're in stage 2 type of evolution there, which is sort of fun because now we don't have to talk about surveys.
Right.
You don't have to talk about any of that type of stuff. Like, the dashboards are up. You want to take a look, have at it, that type of stuff. Our focus and our attention is we see that case and call volume, the proportion of case and call volume that significantly increases for year end, since we do payroll and payment services and all that type of stuff. So that's a big thing to be able to produce W-2s, is because of ABC. This is our recommendation of how we mitigate that. We know OSAT's going to change. We know that expectations are going to change. That's like the bonus. That's the cherry on top. It's about helping them be better at executing, knowing the situational constraints that we're dealing with just because of the seasonality issues.
Yeah, I agree with that. Having run relationship and transactional surveys for years, I am kind of happy they're not reporting to me. Right. So quite frankly, as long as it's being done well. Again, I think there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, for those ongoing repeated survey measures, get them set up well. If there's new information, build that relationship with the leader. And if they're a good researcher, they're going to want to know. They're going to want to know what these things are, right? So that's that. And make sure you're getting the information back. Then the ad hoc VOC work, and I think of VOC very, very broadly, from both things we ask them to things they say to us, that lives with us. So if we are out doing empathy work, for example, that lives with us. Our market research team will advise, and they own our vendor relationships if we want to do that. So they will do some of the project management work, but we are responsible for the design and the reporting and activation against that. That came to mind because I was just out doing some client in-depth interviews about one of our products that we offer. So those live with us, the ad hoc stuff.
We're reminded of something I was talking about, the CXPA Leaders Advance, about the CX leader of the future. And, of course, Roxy, Stuart asked me to record a special version for your team, which is starting with, net revenue retention, one of my favorite. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's great. Starting with that. and then bringing in emotions. Roxy, you got me on that. And then from there, the operational data. And I was talking with a CX leader in financial services today, which is typically the best predictor of the outcomes you care about, which is not a survey score. It's clients who want to buy more, stay longer, interact in ways less expensive to serve. Best predictor is emotions. And often the best predictor of emotions are your operations. And so building all that. Now, the survey plays a role in there, gathering the emotions, but also understanding why. But the great programs don't start with an NPS score or whatever your metric is. They start with a business outcome and then work back to say what predicts that outcome.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's one of those, sort of been on this soapbox for about a year or so. And it's sort of, and people at UKG have been hearing me say this all the time. And I'm like, every single employee in this company needs to understand the P&L, that entire P&L sheet. Because one, you cannot understand why we need to do what we need to do and how it impacts the customer and then the internals without an understanding of that financial downstream element to it. And so I've been on this like campaign of sorts of like, and with my team, like I will do a P&L 101. Now it's sort of bi-monthly, just until it becomes that muscle memory. And then we talk about, okay, so of all of those line items, here's like 5 you really need to pay attention to. And then everything we do, it's tell me how this will impact subscription revenue or services margin or EBITDA or whatever that is, because that's what matters. That's why C-level is going to pay attention to. That's all of that. And we drive those metrics while making sure that customers are having the best experience possible. And so it's, so that's how, it's been a really interesting way to see people's minds click when they start to think about things through financials, which you wouldn't think so, because everyone's like, oh, why am I seeing the P&L? But it sits there and you go, okay, so this is why we have to do this. And, if our services margin is X, like this is what we need to do to change it. And it's going to give us, as a company, we're healthier. We could do more with our customers. And on top of it, how we're changing it actually is going to be better for the customer. So it's a win-win on both sides, but it's talked through just like you did, Jim, at the CXPA Leader Advances, first financial. So if we think about like as a regression equation, like this factor and this, like X1 plus X2 plus X3 equals Y. And that's usually the financial. And if we read left to right, we go, that's how we think about things. But now flip it. Think Y first equals X1, X2, X3. So it's think first the financial, and then what can you do to impact the financial? And I think we've historically have thought about it the other way. So it's just something that I've been like percolating for like the last year or two.
All right. Well, that's tying into how do you educate your team? You talked about getting them to the P&L. Talk a little bit more of how do you keep your team fresh and educated? Beyond going to the conference, of course, do B2B better, September 12th. But beyond that, what else do you do to make sure your teams are, stay fresh?
So it's a lot, for us, ProSci was a big one over the past couple of years. That was like a net add into that mix. Lean Six Sigma is sort of another. So it is a lot of, where can we continue to expand our mini unicorns that we have and sort of get that piece. It's, AI is going to be, is a big one. It's bringing in other talent within the organization and having them sort of like a lecture series, sort of come in and really sort of get everybody to talk about other topics that might not be in their forefront of what they're focused in on, into that mix. It's also even just learning just outside sector stuff, like just like, okay, we've been hearing like USAA is doing something like this, and just sort of really doing a lot of talking and socialization into that mix, but as much education as we can do. I try to make sure that everybody dedicates at least 1 to 2 days a month work-wise in terms of hours to learning. Because we just have to be constantly learning. Otherwise we're going to be too static.
That's great. I would agree with all of those things, particularly to do B2B Better Conference, right? We got to plug it. But A couple of things I also do is giving stretch assignments, right, to your team. So give them things that where they can really lean in and get that on the job training is important. And I also give them everybody gets one passion project. I'm like, yeah, really not something we're working on, but if you feel really strongly about it, you go for it. You go run it and you go figure it out. So, but it can't take up, it's going to take up this much of your time, not this much of your time. But everybody gets a passion project too that they can go lean in on.
Love
That's
it.
cool. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I've spoken about this in the past. I've gotten a lot of flack, so I'm interested in your thoughts. And Roxy, well, actually, both of you are outliers, but generally, I was yesterday watching Nicole Salt from Lippert, their VP of CX, and she talked about how when she looks to hire people outside of VOC analytics work, she looks for people within the business who know the business well and can teach them CX, as opposed to taking people who know CX and teaching the business well. And so she's found that works for her. I'd love your thoughts about hiring from inside versus externally.
So I'm counter to her. So I feel in this, I think it's all situational dependent, right?
Sure.
The organization, all that type of stuff. I feel that it is easier. I mean, listen, I came into human capital management without any knowledge of human capital management. I feel it's easier to learn the business than the deep knowledge that's needed in the study of CX as a profession and all of those. And again, I like to have people know all of the competencies and all that type of stuff. And that is a much longer tail clip to learn and be really good at it very quickly than, okay, let's ramp up in terms of the industry that we're in into that piece. So I'm counter to her, but I can see both sides. I think it just all depends on the company that you're with, the industry that you're in, and what the business needs. So that's sort of how I've gone about it, which I know is not the norm.
Yeah, I agree. It's situational and it depends on the organization.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to teach. It depends, right? What are you looking for somebody who can jump in with both feet and go run something and just go do it? Or are you looking for somebody you're going to have to mentor, who is a change maker, but really maybe doesn't understand empathy mapping or doesn't understand the business. So depending on what you're looking for, I've hired all of these, right? I've hired somebody who knows like deeply embedded in the discipline. I've hired somebody who is coming from completely a different area and really doesn't have a CX background, but is like a super has this amazing attitude and aptitude and has now developed really great relationships with our customer service team and our sales team, right? Who are the people who are going to have to drive these changes through. So I can help you with, what's the right way to put this journey map together, but you go make that change. So
Yeah.
you got to figure out what works for your organization. This is not a prescription.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because like for me, it was really small team and we had to do so much. And I was like, the runway to learn to do all of the CX activities is just, there was not enough time to afford that training. Then, okay, bring in somebody and be like, hey, here's human capital management.
Yeah. I would also suggest that CX training is not standardized yet. So if somebody says they can do journey maps or they can do personas, you don't exactly know what you're going to get out of that either. Right? So.
100%. Yep.
So last question on this is we found a number of people in our interviews were hiring contractors first to see if they would work out and then moving to full-time. Other times they hire a contractor and to build the capability for the role, they maybe hire a different person full-time. Others do entirely new hires. I'd love to hear your strategy regarding contractors.
So that's interesting. So we've had contractors, but that's been more for technology and the integrations. Like we need to build up, connecting to Salesforce or all of that type of stuff. I haven't approached it that way. Having contractors and sort of seeing, partly because of the operational costs to train, to ramp up, and so forth. That's a sunk cost versus that versus like trying to find the right individual, or who we hope is the right individual, and then keeping them. Because otherwise I'm paying like bulk sunk costs in training and ramp up and all of that resource time to get them going over and over and over again. So it's sort of like over the long tail, it's a much higher cost to the business to do, but that's just sort of my personal take on that. Plus I'd like to keep them firmly, I'd like to keep them for a really long time.
I have a different point of view on that. When I was starting the program here at Compeer Financial, one of the things I did is start bringing in contractors early. I had a couple, starting with our digital strategy. One of the great things about working with contractors is they can just come in and get started, right? And you don't have to write a job description, and you don't have to interview, and you don't have to wait for them to quit their other job. They come in and they get started and they get going, right? So it's a quick start on a task. Secondly, you don't have to have quite as articulated what you want them to do. When you were working with a contractor, you could say, go explore this area, go figure out what needs to happen. And I actually did that twice now, where I've said, I'm going to bring you in. We need some work in this area. And then after 3 months, let's evaluate, write out what exactly you are doing so that we can use that to build the position description. Because I don't want to, last thing I want to do is bring somebody in saying they're going to do one thing and then completely change it on them, right? 3 months, 6 months later. So that has really helped us. And it's also helped us level, since these are new roles in our organization, help us make sure we're leveling them correctly and getting the right level of experience into the role.
So let's wrap up with your top advice for CX leaders as they're looking to hire new staff. They're looking to build their team. I'll start with Lori and go to Roxy. As a reminder, of course, they're both speaking at the Do B2B Better conference here in Minneapolis, September 12th. They are part of a small set of people that I'm inspired by. So literally, I went out and I said, okay, I know a lot of people. Who are the people that I want to hear from? So hopefully you agree with my choices and come to the conference and hear from them. So Lori, let's hear your advice. Then Roxy, bring us home.
I guess my best advice is do what feels right to you. Know your organization, know yourself as a leader, and figure out what you need to really help the organization be successful, and lean on your friends and peers for advice, right?
Yeah, and I think it's and I've said this at other last year's Do B2B Better conference. So again, since this is year 2, please come. But it's that whole understand who you understand your organization, understand how they think. And then from there, that's how you start to go, okay, so these are the areas that I need to fill of great talent. Make sure that they're not as matchy-matchy, right? So each person you bring in, yes, they may have the skill sets, but how they approach it, each person might be doing it from a different element, because the collective is way more differentiated, comes up with much more interesting ideas and opportunities into that mix. So it's sort of this really, like, think of it as sort of like this puzzle. And it's like, okay, I've got a little bit of pieces here and a little bit of pieces here. And then how do I fit that together? And what are those missing pieces? And that's who you sort of search for. So you've got the collective whole. Each piece is super awesome, but the collective is exponentially impactful from the organization. And then you sort of match them across with the different leaders that you're contributing to. So it's sort of a really interesting psychology in this, to really sort of think through how to maximize impact.
Excellent. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Great time here talking about really how do we make those critical choices on expanding our team, hiring the right staff. Again, learn more from both of them as well as others at Do B2B Better. We'll see you there on September 12th.